I'd like to welcome you tonight for coming out to learn about the district's realignment and the process we're using to take a look at that. I chair the Realignment Committee, and we're just very thankful that we have parents and citizens here tonight that want to learn more about this. Also, I would like to at this time recognize in our audience our superintendent, Dr. Martin Knox, way back there in the back. We also have our board chairwoman, Dr. Barbara Jackson. We have board member trustee, Ms. Cheryl Ray, board member Mac McLeod, board member Dr. Gloria Lee, and Dr. Johnny Hilton. Now, did I miss any board members? I see a hand back. All right, Dr. Hilton. Okay. And we have some of our committee here tonight, and these board members, Ms. Ray, Mr. McLeod, and Mr. Austin, who is not here yet, are board members on the committee. But our subcommittee members, we have Ms. Bevelyn Collier, Ms. Denise Jones, and those are the two that I see. Are there any others in the audience? Okay. So what I'm going to do is turn the program over now to Mr. James Cooper, and he is one of our consultants working with us on this project, and he will give his presentation and lead us through beyond that. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker, and thank you, committee members, the public that is in attendance tonight, and also virtually. And your work here is much appreciated. So I'm going to go over a little overview of who we are with Cropper GIS Consulting. We're a K-12 school planning business. Been open since 2005, have extensive expertise working with redistricting plans, facility planning, demographic studies, master plans, as well as providing GIS implementation within these projects. GIS is Geographic Information Systems. It's using a software in order to map out and understand where kids live and where attendance boundaries are located to help mitigate and ease these redistricting processes. So we worked with districts all over the country. We on the East Coast, a little bit of the South, and also the Midwest. This is our first year working with Sumter School District, and we're greatly appreciated. We've worked with some districts in South Carolina as well in this region. That includes Charleston County School District, as well as Pickens County School District. So Matthew Copper, that's the CEO. Matthew, if you don't mind standing and raising your hand here. He's the CEO of the company, the creator. He brings more than 20 years of experience providing GIS mapping analysis services to school districts and other clients. He manages and facilitates districting and facility planning projects all across the U.S. He's an expert consultant that also the U.S. Department of Justice and Civil Rights Division, and he's published numerous papers about using GIS to implement master planning and educational planning. And I myself, I'm James Cooper. I'm a GIS planning analyst within the company. I bring over 3 years providing GIS mapping and analysis services to school districts. I've managed an abundance of projects since my time with the company. Some recent ones are Baltimore County Public Schools and also Cabarrus County Schools in North Carolina. So in a nutshell, tonight are, excuse me. So in a nutshell, tonight we're hoping to get the committee's information. Do we have any issues? Okay, I'll just continue without the mic for now. So tonight, in a nutshell, we want the public and members viewing virtually to learn how this community-based student realignment process has been working, understanding the phases of the project and what the work that the committee has done up to date, and the steps to look forward to as we move through this process. And ultimately, we want the public to be able to review realignment options. We have draft options 1B and 2B tonight for elementary, middle school, and high school. And our goal is to have the public examine those options in order to gain a better understanding of the process and the realignment options and how they were developed. And then to ultimately be able to complete an online survey that's related to the options in order to provide the committee and all stakeholders valuable input as to the common sentiment on these options. So while we're here, in 2011, Sumter School District 2, which was the county school district at the time, consolidated with Sumter School District 17, which was the city school district at that time, to become one whole school district for the entire Sumter County. Upon the consolidation, there have not been any realignments of any of the attendance zones for either of the previous school districts since the consolidation. So our primary objective is to examine the district's attendance areas on all three levels, with a focus on establishing a feeder system that best meets the needs of all students in the county as best as possible. So here are the project objectives. These are the objectives that the committee has been using to guide them as they review attendance zones. The goal is to explore and develop student realignment options through a committee and community-driven process, with taking expertise, advice, and recommendations on behalf of the consultant, Cropper GIS. We have a focus on developing options and recommendations for all school levels within the county that best meets the district's realignment criteria. And I will go over the realignment criteria here in a few slides. Thirdly, we want to address imbalances in utilization, as some schools are overutilized while others in the district are underutilized. Fourth, we would also like to address transportation inefficiencies of students and communities. We want to try to establish zones that enable students to attend schools closer to home, if at all possible, while also adhering to the other realignment criteria that I will review here shortly. And lastly, we want to get to the point where we're able to, as a committee, recommend a plan to the school board in March of next year. So in a nutshell, Cropper GIS, we were hired by Sumter School District to facilitate and manage this project. We develop all the supporting materials and help facilitate all the meetings that have happened thus far and moving forward. We empower the community through this process. That's one of the reasons why we host public information sessions, and we implement a very transparent process so that the public is able to follow every step of the way of the committee's work. We want to leverage the expertise of Cropper GIS and their experience in this to develop logical, efficient, and effective student realignment options within the committee. And lastly, we want to recommend a realignment plan to the school board in March of next year. So the realignment criteria, I will go over them. The realignment criteria was approved in the beginning of this process by the school board, and they're looked at like a set of rules to follow when evaluating student realignment options. The realignment criteria are the rules that the committee had been oriented on and follow them as best as possible, and all stakeholders use these to guide them as they evaluate and assess these options. So going through some of the criteria we have, first one is here, and they're in no particular order, in no particular importance, is balanced school facility utilization. We want to make every effort as possible to have equitable utilization across the district with all schools in accordance with the school's capacities and funded allotment ratios in accordance with the state law. We want to make efficient use of the available space at every school within the district. We want to account for future growth, be mindful and cognizant of future development that may be going on in a particular area. You don't want to put too many students in one particular school that may be experiencing a high development rate to ensure that that school is going to be able to accommodate families that will eventually inhabit those new developments. Close proximity is another realignment criteria variable, and that speaks for itself. Students should be assigned to the school closest within proximity to their homes where at all possible. We do understand that not all kids will be able to go to their closest school due to capacity limits and other factors, but if at all possible, that's one of the driving factors as we assess boundaries. Another part of transportation has to do with maximizing busing efficiency. You want to make every effort to account for transportation, bus and car rider, parent commuting patterns, and balance busing travel time and cost. Currently, with some of the school attendance zones in this district, there are some students that are traveling well over an hour via bus to get to school. So those are one of the factors and degree realignment criteria that's driving some of these changes and boundaries for these schools in this district. We want to also establish clear feeder patterns and continuity. Feeder patterns just have to do with how many students from a particular school migrate to the next grade level. So take, for example, elementary school students migrating from 5th grade going to middle school. In a perfect world, we would like 100% of all students in elementary school to go to the middle school at the next grade level. We do understand that in some cases that elementary school will be split and feed into more than one middle school. And in some cases that is unavoidable. But if we are to make a split, we would like to make those splits equitable. So take, for example, if 50% of students at Alice Drive Elementary School feed into Alice Drive Middle School, and then ideally we would like the other 50% of those students to take, for example, feed into Bates Middle School and make it equitable so that students are transitioning to the next level with familiar faces and continued relationships. We want to also allow for the highest grade at current school to legacy enroll. This is a common practice and provision that districts use, especially when considering realignment. And this is also sometimes referred to as grandfathering. This allows for 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade students in the first year of the realignment where they're going into effect to stay at their current school. This helps preserve the impact on some of the families that may be affected and doesn't force any child that is at the graduating grade of their particular school to be forced to go to a new school for 1 year. You want to also minimize impact on students. We do recognize that with a county-wide redistricting process that we're currently doing, that a lot of families will be affected by this when you're dealing with redistricting for the county-wide and on all 3 levels. We want to attempt to minimize the number of students and families impacted when realignment or making boundary adjustments. And then lastly, we want to also account for economic, cultural, and ethnic diversity. We look at the demographics. The committee has looked at the demographics for all schools within the district. And in a perfect world, we always try to have every school mimic the demographic diversity of the county as a whole. And that's always the goal, and that's always a factor that the committee and all stakeholders need to look at when they consider moving a particular area. We want to make every effort to establish continuous school zones. So that has to do with a particular school zone and making it whole in one piece. So take, for example, you have an area that feeds into, that is an entire elementary school zone. You don't want to cross over another zone to another area and make that zone to that main primary area, the elementary school zone. We like to refer to that as satellite zones. It's not encouraged, and it creates transportation inefficiencies and busing implications. And lastly, we like to use major roads and natural boundaries wherever feasible to define attendance zones. Busy roads, interstate highways, railroad tracks, mountainous features. Those are good natural boundary lines to help define a particular attendance area. So when we consider moving a particular zone, we like to use those major variables like interstates and major roads as barriers to define a particular area and make it very easy on families to understand what zone they may belong to. And once again, I want to remind you that all criteria is of equal importance. No one is more important than the other, and the best plan is one that touches on all the criteria but does not focus solely on one realignment criteria. So now I'm going to review the timeline here, going over a little bit of the work that has already been done by the committee, as well as what to look forward to. So you'll see here that we started our work here with the district in July of 2021. There's been an extensive amount of data that was collected between July and September, including student data that we use GIS software in order to map out and know exactly where every student lives within the district to kind of get an understanding of how far students are traveling to get to their currently enrolled school. The committee has had up to 4 meetings up to this date, and throughout that process, they've reviewed an abundance of information, including transportation distance data, among other things, that have led up to this point here at this public information session. We had the first public information session was in September of this year, and at that public information session, we informed the public. It was virtually, and we informed the public on the process and gave them a little bit of details on how to interact throughout this realignment study. So you'll see here we are in December at the second public information session, where we'll be reviewing a little bit of the process, but we'll also get into more in depth about the options that the committee has been deliberating upon in order to gain understanding and public feedback on how they may feel about these draft options. Following this public information session, we have one more tomorrow at Sumter High School at 6 p.m. And then the next committee meeting is going to be in January of next year. And at that time, they will review the survey that we have posted that is live currently in order to understand how the public feels about these options. And then the committee has one more meeting in January 27th. Two more meetings after January 13th, one in January 27th, and then we'll have a third public information session there in February. And at that time, the public will be informed on the current draft options that will likely be modified from tonight, in order to gain more insight on how the public may feel about new draft options the committee has put out to the public. And then the ultimate goal after that, the third public information session in February, well, the committee will have one more meeting in March, and then March 28th is the expected date that the presentation of the final recommendation to the board is expected to take place. So now I'll go over a little bit of the work done to date. The committee is about halfway through this process. They've met 4 times since August of this year and have spent many hours in between meetings reviewing information and new data. The committee has reviewed over 4 variations of draft options since the process started. We started with just 2 for each grade level, and then we generated 2 additional options at the following meetings. And those 2 additional options are the options 1B and 2B that we'll be reviewing here tonight. The data and information that the committee has used in order to inform them on some of their decisions when it comes to realignment includes school enrollment data and capacity. Capacity is just how many students a particular school facility can host. Demographics, the understanding the demographics a particular school has in a particular area hosts. Feeder pattern data, the patterns and how many students from a particular elementary school feed into middle and then middle into high. Student impacts data and understanding how many kids will be impacted if we were to move a particular area. And then also transportation distance analysis. This is the average distance miles traveled for kids at a particular school. And then also feedback from members of the public, which they've been very engaged since this process began. And I just want you to remember that all options are considered draft throughout the process. Continued dialogue is expected to occur, and consideration of data is always encouraged, and we can always expect that these draft options can and will be modified moving forward. Ultimately, the committee's goal is to recommend one option to the school board in March. So we have a good bit of time between now and March where options can and will be changed based on new data and public feedback that may indeed improve these options as they pertain to the project objectives and the realignment criteria. Nothing will be final until the school board approves a plan. So we always plan with the focus of transparency, keeping the public engaged and letting them be able to follow throughout this process on the work that's being done by the committee. All materials that is shared with the committee at any meeting is also available at on the Sumter Realignment webpage. You can reach that webpage at www.sumterrealignment.com. On that webpage, you'll find tabs for every single meeting that the committee has had since August, and then all the materials that the committee were reviewing at that time. The Realignment webpage also contains an online feedback form, a general feedback form that the public is encouraged to go on, click on that feedback form and leave comments regarding the process at any time. That information is also shared with the committee in order for them to deliberate on any ideas the public may have as they pertain to the realignment options. The public is welcome to attend the committee meetings and observe them virtually, but they are not participants. And then we also have public information sessions like we do here tonight. This is the second one throughout this process. They've been held at all 3 high schools, with another one being hosted tomorrow, December 8th, at Sumter High School at 6 p.m. And then we have one last public information session in February of next year. The public, like I said, the public has been very engaged throughout this entire process. We've received over 110 comments via that general feedback form, where the public has given us their ideas and their sentiment on how these draft options are being displayed and the work that's being done by the committee. There have been public members that have observed these committee meetings virtually. And then again, all the materials are posted on sumterrealignment.com, and they can be downloaded and viewed at any moment. And then also, the public has been able to have access to an interactive map that the committee has also used as well. And this interactive map, I'll go over here in a few minutes, but it allows you to be able to view these options and planning block data and current zone data to understand and compare what things are changing. So before we go out, following this presentation to the gallery walk and gather around the maps, I'll give you a little bit of information on the maps so to give you a better understanding on how to interpret them. Background colors represent the options. There's different background colors for each school zone, depending on if you're looking at an elementary school zone map, middle school or high school. The bold black outlines on the option maps are showing the current boundary lines for current zones. So you can kind of understand if you see a bold black outline within a particular one color, that shows that there's some areas that are actually changing that weren't the same. All the maps have titles and notes that clarify which each map has. And then when all maps have planning blocks, which are basically small areas within a zone to examine student population. So planning blocks are like the building blocks of this realignment process. It's a very easy way, like a puzzle piece, to kind of understand how many kids live in a particular area, and then it gives the committee a better understanding of how that area will be impacted and how many kids will be impacted by moving it to another school. There are also labels within these planning blocks. These labels show a planning block ID. So like take for example here, you'll see on the maps, you'll see a planning block ID PB 142. And then looking here, this is Manchester Elementary, and you'll see that there are 53 K through 5 students that live within this planning block. So it gives you a good understanding of how many kids live in each planning block. So for elementary school maps, you'll see the planning block number under the planning block ID, which is a unique value, will show K through 5th. The middle school maps, that bottom number will show 6th through 8th graders. And then on the high school maps, it'll show 9th through 12th graders. So this is another snapshot of what the planning block IDs look. This is based off of a middle school map, and it gives you a good idea of how many kids live in a particular area, and gives you a good unique value. So say if you're a member of the public and you see a particular area that you have a question about or have a suggestion for, leaving a comment on the general feedback form saying, hey, I live in planning block 37. That gives the committee and us as the consultants a good idea of where to look at and understanding what area that you're specifically referencing. Again, we also have an online map. This online map has been developed to further the information of all stakeholders. The committee has used it and the public has access to it as well. The online map shows current zones, and then also options are currently on the online map that can be reviewed. The map also has other features that can be turned on and off, including planning blocks and planning block labels to understand how many kids are in a particular area. As you open up the planning block, the interactive map, you're able to zoom in and you'll see more information like parcel data, streets, address data, to really help you hone in on what area you want to look for. It's very, very resourceful. There's also a tab at the top where you could search for a particular address within the county. And the site can be viewed on any device. You can look at it on your phone, your tablet, your computers, and anything of that nature as long as it has internet connection. And again, to reach the online map, it's www.croppermap.com/Sumter. You can also be able to go to sumterrealignment.com in order to go find the link to get to the Cropper map. This is just a snapshot of what the online map looks like when you open it up. It's going to show you a countywide of the district. You'll have a legend over here to kind of give you information on what certain symbols on the map mean. And then there's also tabs where you can click on and off middle school, high school zones, and then currently there's also the options that are on the interactive map as well. There are also tables that are outside at the gallery walk that we'll be going over as well, and then also on every handout. Every meeting the committee has had, they've been given an options analysis handout, which goes over the statistics that they help use to inform them on their decisions. We'll review a series of those tables here in these next few slides to give you an idea how to interpret them and make sure that you know that you have a good understanding of how to read them and what they're trying to display. These statistics are pertinent and very important to the study, and they're available in plot maps outside in the gallery walk. This information helps inform all stakeholders and helps on how schools will be potentially impacted as a result of realignment adjustments. And then all the calculations in these tables are based off of the 2020-2021 fall student enrollment data. So looking at it here, this is an enrollment estimate table. You'll find these in all the handouts and also on the table plots. These give you an idea of the schools. We have them for elementary, middle, and high, and it gives you an idea of the schools that are within the district, the total enrolled, the capacity of the schools, how many students can that school actually accommodate, and then this row here, the total enrolled 2020-2021. Gives you an indication of how many students are currently in that school. And then you also have the options to give you the estimated enrollment for these schools. So looking here at Alice Drive Elementary School, you'll see that currently they have 629 students enrolled as of 2020-2021. And then in these options, in option 1B, they would be estimated to have 471 students. And then option 2B, they would be estimated to have 548 students. Another table that you'll see are feeder pattern tables. This is how many students from a particular school feed into the next level school. So looking at this table here, you'll see a row here. This is elementary school option 1B. So you'll see a column here that highlights all the schools, and then you'll also see a column here that is highlighting the middle schools. And then you'll see a percentage all the way on the right column that shows you how many students from the elementary school will be going to that middle school. So looking at Olive Drive here, 100% of elementary schools at Olive Drive Elementary will feed into Olive Drive Middle School in option 1B. Comparatively, looking at Cherryville Elementary, 78% of elementary schools at Cherryville will feed into Olive Drive Middle School, while 22% of those students will feed into Hillcrest. When we were talking about splits and making them balance, we do understand that not in every situation will 100% of students be able to feed into a middle school, but if at all possible, we would like to make that split balance to ensure that those students are moving to the next level with familiar faces and can continue relationships that they've built over the years. So looking down here on option 1B, Oakland, Shaw Heights, High Hills elementary schools, 56% of them feed into Ebenezer Middle School, while 44% feed into Hillcrest Middle School. So compared to Cherryville Elementary, that's a bit more of a balanced split compared to Cherryville. And that's always the goal when we consider realignment options and then feeder patterns and are examining these statistics. And then you'll also find utilization tables. This right here is a middle school utilization table shown here. So you'll get a good indication of the middle school and then how full it is compared to its capacity. So looking at Olive Drive Middle School, it has a capacity of 1,300 and it's about 73% full currently. Comparatively, when you look at option 1B for Olive Drive Middle School, it gets down to 61%. And then for option 2B, it goes down to 63%. So the utilization tables are very important to understand how full a school may be in a particular option. And then ideally, we want these numbers to be balanced. In a perfect world, we would have all numbers mimic the district average, which is 52% for middle schools. Another table that you will see are impacts. We do realize that we're going to be impacting a lot of families with this realignment process, especially when you're doing a county-wide realignment study. So here shows the middle school impacts. So in option 1B, at the middle school level, we're looking at about 824 6th through 8th graders that will be impacted and moved to a different school based on these realignment options. In option 2B, we're looking at 577. So for 1B, we're looking at about a 22% of the middle school is being impacted, while 2B, we're looking at about 15.5% being impacted. Another piece of data the committee has used and has been very valuable in informing them on some of their decision making are transportation distance tables. You'll find these on the elementary, middle school, and high school level within the handouts and on the table plots. This gives you an indication on the average distance in miles that students travel to get to school. So here's the high schools shown, for example, here. Looking at Crestwood, currently 9 through 12th graders that attend Crestwood, the average distance in miles that students are traveling to get to this school is 11 miles. For Lakewood, it's 7, and then for Sumter, it's 3.5 miles. With these options, we bring that number down as a committee down to 7.54 at Crestwood High School in option 1B. In option 2B, that number goes down even further to 6.97 miles. This helps create a more equitable distance travel for all schools within a district, so that not one school is receiving a very short travel distance to school while others' kids are being negatively impacted in that factor. Another table that the committee has used and that we have developed in order to kind of get a good summarization of how well we are adhering to the realignment criteria are option rank tables. The rank tables are pretty much based off of option scores. We were able to create a system that kind of scores these options based on the variables, which the variables are the realignment criteria. So these rankings are weighing option 1B and 2B versus each other to see which one ranks higher, with a rank 1 being better and rank 2 being the second best. So looking at these, you'll see that the variables that are being scored and ranked are based off of the realignment criteria. So total students impacted, that's being ranked. The utilization is being ranked. The average student transportation distance is being ranked. Demographic diversity, and then elementary school to middle school feeder patterns is being ranked. And on the middle school level, it's middle school to high school feeder. So when you look at it in the totality, you'll see that option 1B both options are very, very similar and comparable to one another. But option 1B does a little bit better at the elementary school level. But when you look at the middle school level here, you'll see that option 2B ranks a little higher than option 1B. And then when you look at the high school level, they're about even. So when you look at the total option rank, both of these options are even when it comes to their rank. So they're very, very comparable to one another, and they're both improving upon these variables. So tonight we'll have a gallery walk. This presentation will get wrapped up here soon so that we can go out as a staff and committee members to go around the maps and the table plots and talk with some of the public about any questions, concerns, or just to gain some knowledge about this process. Committee members, Sumter School District staff, and the consultants, myself and Matthew Cropper, will be around those tables to help assist any thoughts the public may have. Although discussion around these maps is very important and the questions are encouraged, we still would like you to submit your feedback via the online survey for the entire committee's benefit. Once again, we have an online survey that went live yesterday following our presentation, and that survey will be live until January 3rd of next year. The survey is very important. We encourage every single one to participate, and anybody you know that is within the community to also participate in the survey. It won't take very long to complete, but it's very, very important because it gives the committee an idea of the public sentiment on these options and may drive certain modifications. The survey, the public feedback isn't intended to see which option gets the most votes. It's not a popularity contest. The best feedback is one that is objective and constructive comments that where suggested changes are to help the committee modify these options to better adhere to the project objectives and the realignment criteria. We understand this is a very, very emotional aspect of this process, and we know that some families are emotionally driven, but we want you, if at all possible, to be more objective with your comments and your questions and concerns, and look at the totality of the school district and not just your community or your individual neighborhood. Changes will only be made if it brings us closer to the objectives or criteria. Following today, the committee has 3 more meetings that are scheduled after tonight's public information session. The next meeting will be in January of next year, where the committee will review the results of the public survey. Also, the adjustments can and probably will be made to these options if the suggestions from the public help us better adhere to the objectives and considerations for these options. And then there will be one more public information session in this process that is scheduled to start on February 22nd of next year. It will be the same type of process. It will be held at all 3 high schools over a matter of 3 days. And there you can expect, as a public, to see a modified set of options compared to tonight. Again, thank you for your time. Won't hold you any longer. If we could all migrate to the halls, to the maps and tables, where we can gather around and speak with committee members. There are members out there with orange lanyards that will be able to, that highlights and shows you who is a committee member or a consultant, and those are the folks that you should direct your questions